We're at the Wheeler Centre tonight because the former immigration minister in the Howard regime, Philip Ruddock, is speaking here. He's been given a full platform. No one else on the panel, just him and a person interviewing him. He was really the person that extended Labor's mandatory detention into the Pacific solution. So the current abhorrent offshore detention facilities we have begun with Philip Ruddock's implementation. He was the man that lied to the Australian people over children overboard, and 10 years later he has no regrets about lying to the Parliament, to the people. He was also then appointed the Attorney General. So under his watch as Attorney General, we had Dr. Mohammed Hanif arrested under the new anti-terror laws, which he helped sweep in. We had Australian citizen David Hicks tortured and held in Guantanamo Bay for 6 years. We had Cornelia Rao and I believe several other citizens that were incorrectly detained and thought to be non-Australian citizens and deported out of the country and detained in detention centres. Philip Ruddock has no regrets, none, about all of the things that he has done, and he is now set to become the UN Human Rights Envoy. I think this is despicable. I think that if we are going to have a human rights envoy to the UN, the Australian people should have a choice in who that is. And absolutely, the man that implemented the infrastructure to create the current concentration camps that we have with Manus Island and Nauru, and who implemented the infrastructure for the Border Force Act that now has doctors and nurses and journalists locked out of commenting, reporting, speaking out about abuses and the way we treat asylum seekers is just appalling. And I think most Australians, if they actually understood what was going on, would be incredibly disappointed to hear that this is the pick of the bunch. And I actually believe he's being rewarded for his bad behaviour. And I'm pretty sure that Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton will get the same treatment when they leave. These are jobs for the boys, jobs for the corrupt, jobs for human rights abusers. And Philip Ruddock should not be able to come into Melbourne and not hear from the community at how outraged we are at the way that he abused Australian human rights and asylum seeker human rights. And his failure to support David Hicks, who really was cable-tied, waterboarded, tortured at the hands of our ally while he did nothing, is just appalling. And I'm here to let him know that I want to look him in the eye and say, I see you and you do not represent me. In terms of the police presence, look, I'm not surprised. Police are here to protect the state. They're not here to protect the people. I think that's pretty clear across the globe at the moment. And I hope the Wheeler Centre learns a lesson from this, that if they're going to give Philip Ruddock a platform, they better give someone who is actually concerned about human rights the same platform to counter his false history and false memories of his years in the Howard government and their despicable treatment of refugees.
The plan for tonight is just to stand out here and protest, to make our voices heard, to let people know going inside that this person isn't qualified to be a human rights envoy. It was basically a job for the boys. He was given this position the same day that he resigned from Parliament. Julie Bishop announced that he was getting this position. It's a position that he's not only not qualified to give, it's the sort of position that qualified people would advocate that he should be detained on war crimes in. And so it's absolutely outrageous that he's here, and so we're going to let people know what we think.
We'll have a few chants if people would like to speak and say why they're here, talk about their experiences of Ruddock, talk about their experiences of the continued racism of the Australian government.
9/11 is a really significant point where anti-terror laws were introduced, which Ruddock had a lot to do with, and where refugees suddenly became demonised from fleeing the countries that we were bombing and are still bombing to this day. And I started thinking about the way the men in power treat everyone that is not them, and how we have enabled that to happen by not fighting back against them, by being polite, by being respectful. This is his reward for treating women, gay people, refugees and Indigenous people like shit for the last 20 years. It's a shame. And
He's the worst kind of human rights abuser, and he's going to be speaking on human rights. What a shame. What a shame. What a monster he is. It is his legacy that during his first tenure, the first time when he became the immigration minister, he altered the Migration Act of 1951 to a point where people are still languishing. Children, innocent children, women and men are languishing for years into the detention centers. He's the person who introduced pacific solution. There will be a time when people will condemn these bastards, ruining people's lives, ruining families, and holding people to ransom so that nobody should come to Australia. Don't be coward. If you don't feel any room in your heart, Australia should get out of that international treaty, give them international obligation to accept asylum seekers in this country. And what a shame. What a shame Australia is part of those effective, active wars. They create refugees, and when it comes to accept refugees, they find no room. When the countries, the third countries, where they go and bombard countries, millions of people flee to the third countries. And what a shame, when few thousand comes to Australia, Australians' political system starts to melt down. And shame on Philip Ruddock. He's a monster of a man. He should be condemned everywhere, wherever he goes.
And it's not just the refugees on Nauru and Manus Island, it's also the refugees on Christmas Island, it's also the refugees in detention centres, it's also the asylum seekers who are being pushed through a fast-track process where they're not allowed the right of appeal. And you know how many mistakes, dangerous mistakes that are made by Immigration Department officials that result in legitimate asylum seekers and refugees being rejected and deported. And there's visible resistance going on in so many ways, from civil disobedience actions against Wilson Security to divestment campaigns to divest from any of the companies that are implicated in this system, to doctors groups, to trade union groups, to all sorts of groups. So we basically have to keep that campaign going, because it's only through a mass campaign that we can end the cruelty and injustice that's happening to refugees. And by rights, Australia should be up before all sorts of human rights tribunals. Australia's really a war criminal for what we're doing to refugees in our name.
The key architect of the gulags that were torturing refugees across Australia and then ultimately at Nauru was Philip Ruddock. He was the immigration minister under the Howard government until about 2003, when he became the Attorney General. And this guy is the chief human rights abuser, the person most synonymous with the evil and the violence that was committed against innocent people who were trying to seek safety and refuge in Australia, fleeing from wars, fleeing from persecution, and they were locked up indefinitely by the Immigration Minister, Philip Ruddock. Also because this policy is not in the dustbin of history where it deserves to be, that subsequent Liberal and then Labor governments have continued to detain refugees, to lock them up, to imprison these essentially political prisoners, these people who the government uses as scapegoats to divide people, to distract from their policies. So this is an ongoing regime of torture, of racism, and Philip Ruddock is very much at the heart of the cruel policies that began under the Howard government. So yeah, we're here to disrupt his night.
Well, Philip Ruddock has altered my life, as he has altered thousands of people's life, and continues to happen so. So, I feel like that he's an absolute hypocritic person, and he shouldn't be in a position where he is a human rights envoy. He is actually a worst human rights violator, abuser, and he should be put to shame. He should be told as he is. That's why I'm here, to protest against his presence here, and I have written a letter to Wheeler Centre as well, telling them how bad it is that they have invited him to speak on a human rights, whereas he has got the worst record, a very checkered and questionable past as a human rights violator and abuser. He shouldn't be here. Yeah, I came out of detention centre on psychological grounds. I still have no family here. I applied for my family for 7 years and still no response. So
you were locked up in Moreland Detention Centre for some time?
30 months, yeah.
During the time that Philip Ruddock was Immigration Minister?
He was a minister, yeah. When I came out, Amanda Vanstone just took over, I have seen most of his ministerial tenure in detention.
This is a man who treats us with contempt, a government that treats us with contempt, that they can nominate him as an envoy for the UN Human Rights Committee is a total mockery. Mind you, that committee itself is a mockery with Saudi Arabia presiding on it. Shame. Shame. So we are here today in solidarity with the people who are in prison, political prisoners on Manus and Nauru, the people imprisoned onshore. This issue continues today. Ruddock was part of the machinery that really built up the dehumanising of our fellow human beings, and we won't let him forget it. Free the refugees! Open the borders, close the path! Free the refugees! Lock up Ruddock! Throw away the keys! We won't stop till we free the refugees! Lock up Ruddock! Throw away the keys! We won't stop till we free the refugees!
We want to send a message that we are all much more qualified to be envoys for human rights than Philip Ruddock. Yes. Okay, let's go. Free the refugees. 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 Free the refugees.
No, it's a public event.
Yeah, it's a public event, so it's allowed
It's absolutely public, advertised public.
There we go. You're a good mate. Why are you letting us in? Let this guy through, please. Will you let this man through? Not yet. Why not? He's got his ticket.
Absolutely. They barricade the whole. They barricade that too. They barricade all entries. What other entries is there?
LGBT rights victories.
Close the camps. Free the refugees.
Okay, so the rally's over now. I think it was really important that we're here. We made it clear that Ruddock doesn't represent us, that he's not our human rights envoy, that this government doesn't have a mandate on refugees. The reality is there's a two-party system in Australia where both parties are trying to outdo each other to see who can be the most racist. And I think that what we did today by standing up to the likes of Ruddock highlighted our point, and hopefully people go inside will actually, particularly for younger people who might not remember Philip Ruddock, will actually go inside now knowing who Ruddock is, knowing about the continuation of this policy and the need to keep up the fight for refugees.